what's up everyone? Let's talk jerkbaits. Do we want to call this a tip video? I don't think this is a tip video. It's just maybe a better understanding of what's really been going on. Maybe say with like jerkbaits over the last couple years, Livescope, to use Livescope, not to use Livescope, and what happens if you don't have Livescope? Like, what do we do with the jerkbait, right? The jerkbait has become the one bait that I think was like the biggest thing to use on Livescope. Okay, so that's really what happened. We started using the jerkbait more and more, and we started understanding about it more and more. And that's maybe what this video is about, is understanding the jerkbait and what Livescope has taught us from that. But you don't need Livescope to catch them on a jerkbait. You still don't need that. They go hand in hand, but so many of y'all, like me, we didn't have Livescope for all those years. So let's go over, like, I wouldn't say the misconceptions, but things we've learned and how we can like keep on learning from Livescope, how we can just use that to better catch fish. So for years, the jerkbait was this, right? It was the standard old jerkbait. They didn't go very deep, right? Most of them went shallow, okay? And I'm gonna bring up this one. This one's like your good old, man, that was your typical Lake of the Ozarks, those type of places, Table Rock. That's what the jerkbait was really used for, were those cold water conditions, right? Pre-spawn, lethargic, suspended fish, and it worked. When I started first using the jerkbait though, I didn't live up there, and so we didn't really throw it over the same type of stuff, right? Back then, like, guys were throwing it down certain banks, and they were suspended maybe out in front of boat docks, maybe away from the bank, and they were just it was a weird fish. And the jerkbait for forever was the only way to catch them. We had to start using it differently. We lived around grass, so we had a whole bunch of hydrilla. The rattle trap, right? A vibrating bait like that was the best way to catch them. We started figuring out the jerkbait was a way to also catch them over the grass. And we needed some things, right? We needed some sun to get them to rise away from the grass and suspend. And then we started figuring out there were certain banks that we couldn't catch fish off of, banks that we didn't even think fish lived on. Those were the banks that were sometimes the best for the jerkbait, because like I said, they would move away from the bank. They were steeper banks. There wasn't a lot of grass there, but there was fish there, and no one was fishing for them. So we figured out the jerkbait bite. Now, back then, and I don't hear it talked about anymore, and we'll get into that. Back then, there was a cadence, right? It was a way you worked a jerkbait. It was, we studied it a lot. Like, we would jerk, pause, jerk, pause, jerk, pause, right? It was this way of working it that sometimes got bit. The cadence was important, and then on top of that was the pause, how long to pause it. Back then, it was basically the colder the water, the longer the pause, okay? And that's all we knew, right? Because back then, when I say back then, all we had to go off of was what we did and what produced results, right? We didn't really see what was going on. Now, things have changed since then. We got the deeper jerkbait, okay? This is Strike King's DD 300, okay? These things start going 8, 10, 11 foot, right? And we were being able to get it down there deeper. This is almost all I throw now, is the deep diver one. I'll throw the shallow one, but for the most part, the deep diver one is really what I'm using most of the time, okay? Now, this specific one, why this specific one? Well, this is where it gets tricky, guys. There's a lot of debates on what the best jerkbait is, right? And I have a different philosophy, okay? I always look at it as this. There's some really good baits out there, and they become good or they become trendy, right? And they become that way, and so everyone throws them. Well, usually when a bait becomes real trendy and everyone throws them, I don't think they're that good anymore. And the reason I don't think they're that good anymore is because they're all being thrown, like everything getting looked at. And so the other trendy thing I see is if it's hard to get, or if it looks pretty and it's expensive. Now, this started happening with me a long time ago with crankbaits when I grew up on Livingston, that we got into some high dollar crankbaits, like some shallow running high dollar crankbaits. We were already catching them on the $5.99 crankbaits, but then they came out with these $15.99 crankbaits, right? And well, they must be better because they cost more. And so I just think, I'm not gonna tell you which one's better. All I'm gonna tell you is, I throw this one, I throw Strike Kings. I got into throwing it. I realized one of the best jerkbait fishermen in the world designed it, and Kevin Van Dam. They're not that expensive. And what's cool is this, I live in the real world. I'm not out there trying, like on TV, trying to sell this bait, right? I'm not out there like, this is the only bait that'll catch fish. Other ones will too. What's funny is the amount of people now that come up to me and say, hey man, and they know I throw Strike King a lot. They're like, hey, that deep 300 is really, really good. I'm like, yeah, I know. They're like, no, it's like, it's really, really good. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, we all know this. It doesn't get the love sometimes that other jerkbaits do, because it's not the trendy one, right? It's not the, I mean, people feel like jumping on trends more than just going, well, you know, this one's a maybe more of a generic one, or maybe this, or maybe that. You know, it doesn't cost as much, so it can't be as good. It's crazy how that happens. So what's really funny is the amount of people, and it's sneaky. If you watch on TV, when people don't talk about jerkbaits, like when they don't explain what jerkbait they're actually throwing, they're throwing this one. They just might not be sponsored by it. It's a good one. It's a good quality jerkbait. Like it smashes on them.
Big one.
And so that's one of the deals. That's one of the things that is I guess funny to me. Now here's the second one. Livescope has changed the way we think about jerkbaits. Okay. For one, we used to think jerkbaits, we only knew the conditions to throw them in. The water color, how cold it was, the time of the year, all these things. We didn't realize that like fish were suspending that much, right? And so what we've come to find out is there's a lot of just fish suspending all the time, year round, all over the lake. Not these like perfect banks that I talked about that were different banks. I mean, heck, now they're just out there in the middle of the lake. Now, I bring up Livescope because Livescope has taught us that. Now, you might not have Livescope, and that's okay. What I'm going to explain to you is, I always look at it from 2 points of view. There's guys that have Livescope and guys that don't. The guys that have Livescope are going out there and targeting specific fish. What I've realized with jerkbait fishing though, and Livescope, is you rarely just see a random fish out there by itself. There's usually more of them. Now, there might be random fish scattered in an area by themselves, but they're still in an area. You can still catch those fish without ever having Livescope. If you know those fish are there, and what I mean by if you know those fish are there, sometimes they're out there in the middle of the lake on nothing. But most of the time there's a reason, right? There's usually shad in an area. And especially like this time of the year, like pre-spawn to spawn, they're rarely out in the middle of the lakes. They're up there usually funneling into pockets, funneling into creeks and things like that. So usually if you can just idle around with your regular sonar or anything like that and just find bait, you can usually catch them on a jerkbait. They're usually fish on bottom, fish on top, suspended. So you don't need Livescope, guys. Could it make it easier at times? Yes. But what I've learned with Livescope is all that cadence, the cadence really isn't as important as it once was. Usually what you can realize is most of those fish out there, and the fish that we were still trying to catch back in the day, were feeding fish, like fish that still wanted to eat. Now, they might not have attacked your jerkbait instantly, but they did go and attack it. They did go and eat it. And if you watch on Livescope, you'll watch fish. There's tons and tons of fish that are always following your jerkbait that don't eat it, right? The ones that usually eat it, they're the ones that like want to eat it pretty quick. Like you eventually get your bait around the fish. the fish usually doesn't follow your bait forever and then eat it. It sometimes does, but usually you get your bait around a fish that's wanting to feed and it eats it. That's why like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna throw just a regular good jerkbait. Now color, yes, color matters. That's the hard one. The cadence, I don't think the cadence matters near as much as the color. So I've got a bunch, right? And I've got a bunch of different, I mean, if I just go through here and start popping them out, I don't even have to look. I mean, I've got them of clear ones and white ones. I mean, I already got that color, right? I mean, what else? I got this one. I mean, I've got colors, because that is the one thing, right? That is the one thing that, as I've seen, color make way more of a difference than cadence. I mean, like, you'll go along and get 15 followers and never catch one, and change colors and instantly start catching them. So color to me is way more than cadence. And like I said, cadence is like how you're working it. Because when I first saw it on Livescope, it was crazy to me that it was in the fall. The water temp was pretty warm. It wasn't cold at all. And the slower I worked it, like I would jerk it and I would watch them come from a long ways away, and they were like in slow motion, and it'd take them forever to get there. And then all of a sudden when I jerk it, like they'd eat it on the pause, and it was warm outside. And then I've seen it cold where you had to jerk it super fast because they were active. They wanted it fast. And a lot of times I think too is because they're getting too good of a look at it. So you have to actually work it faster. These are the things I've learned from Livescope, but I really still didn't need Livescope to catch those fish. Like, I could just still go around blind casting. Like, you get in these areas, you don't really have to look at them. So keep that in mind. Okay, let's talk setup. We got a Team Lou's Signature Series Kevin Van Dam rod, okay? It actually says jerkbait on his rod, okay? It's a 610 power, medium heavy, fast. I'm a tall guy. I still like long rods. I can jerkbait with the 7 foot, maybe even a 7.2. It doesn't bother me. Anything over that's too big. The 610 is great. It's easy. I remember back in the day, man, jerkbaiting all day long used to like wear you out, right? For whatever reason, like, this rod doesn't wear me out. I don't even pay attention to the fact that I could jerkbait all day long. And like I said, I'm gonna trust the guys at Strike King and the guys at Lou's and everything. That company has been building things, not just randomly and putting Kevin's name on it. Like, if you go out there, you'll see Kevin fishing with this rod. There's no reason why Kevin would go out there and build a rod that he doesn't want to use. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So he's actually using these rods. We work hand in hand with everyone to build exactly what we want. Like, we might make 10 of those prototypes and figure out, hey, this is the one that actually I want that works. So yeah, I'm gonna trust Kevin on that. I'm gonna trust that guy, right? We talk about it all the time. This is the rod, and for me personally, this Team Lou's Pro TI, it is an expensive reel. I get that, but it's a reel that like is really smooth and casts really well. Well, from a lot of things, if you notice, I've got a lot of, if y'all know me, I got a lot of these reels, right? Super Duties, big Super Duty reels, right? And I've got those on there because like I throw a lot of bigger stuff. Like, I throw things it's something heavy, something I can throw into the wind, right? I got a swim jig on one, I've got a glide bait on one, Texas rig, frog. I've got those because I can bomb those out there. It's got big line, big braid, big whatever. This is something, the jerkbait, that it doesn't weigh a lot. I'm throwing it on a lighter rod. I'm gonna have a lighter line, and I'm trying to make really long, good casts into the wind with the lighter bait. This reel throws maybe the best of any of Lou's reels, and it's so smooth. That's why I have the Team Lou's Pro TR in there. Now, I've got it with 12-pound Sunline. 12-pound Sunline fluorocarbon sniper, and that's it. Now, that's the setup. That's, if I'm gonna throw a jerkbait, that's what I have on there. And that's pretty simple, guys. The hooks, I usually leave alone. You will bend these hooks though, right? Like, You bend hooks for a lot of different reasons, okay? You bend hooks, they get rusty. Like some of these, like this one, this bait right here, you can see a little bit of a rust on the head. I've had this for years, right? I don't mind fishing with this in practice, but eventually, like in a tournament, I'm gonna have really good hooks on there. So like here's one. These I have, like, I mean, like I can just touch that thing and it catches. These are like sharp hooks. Those are owner Zowire. Those are number 4s, okay? And you can put 4s that like it's not going to change the weight of them. The action's still the same, but I like putting those Zowires when I have to. I don't change them right away, right? But like I said, you get like this one for whatever reason. Like the first 2 hooks are great. This back one got a little rust on there. I mean, it happens to all of us, right, guys? It just happens to certain baits, whether it be in your boat, whatever. It gets a little water on them, gets a little rust. So I'll change them with those hooks. So that's pretty much the only thing I'll do. Other than that, that's my setup. And just go throw a jerkbait more. You'd be surprised how many places and where you can actually go throw the jerkbait and get away with it. Like, you don't have to wait for the pre-spawn and the cold weather and the clear water and stuff like that. There's usually fish suspended year-round on most of these lakes, and you don't have to look at them in Livescope. It helps. I will say that, but none of us always have it, right? And sometimes it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's blowing real hard and right? Still fish, guys. It's still fishing. We're just learning that we can throw this bait. It's more versatile now. And what I mean by versatile, you still can't go throw it in bushes, right? You can't go throw it in that's not the versatile I'm talking about. It's more versatile over the time of the year in the water. You can go throw it out there in the open water, in the middle of pockets, in places you never thought about throwing baits before. Livescope has showed us that, but you don't need Livescope to still catch fish on it. I hope this helps, guys. Let me know what y'all think about the new and improved jerkbait. See y'all.